Brian Enriquez was at work on Thursday when he received a Ring doorbell notification. He couldn't get to his phone right away, something that he now regrets. Captured on his doorbell's video, a UPS driver struggling to walk to the door and then collapsing on his porch.
That's right. A UPS driver collapsed thanks to the unbelievable heat wave that is taking hold of most of this country as we speak. There are real consequences to this heat wave, especially if you're a UPS driver who has to deliver in a vehicle that lacks air conditioning. And by the way, if you're a UPS worker in a warehouse, it's very likely you don't have air conditioning there either. And now this has become a huge problem because workers are getting sick. And instead of investing in what's necessary to keep these workers safe during the heat wave, to keep them cool, to make sure they're healthy, UPS decided to invest their money on surveillance instead. We'll get to that in a moment, but first, what was the reaction of UPS after they learned of their worker collapsing like that? We appreciate the concern for our employee and can report that he is fine. UPS drivers are trained to work outdoors and for the effects of hot weather. The onus is really on the workers. With adequate training, they can somehow, supercharge their superhuman powers to withstand heat without air conditioning. Okay. Now, reportedly, the worker called his manager after the incident and did receive help, but UPS workers around the country are suffering right now because of extreme conditions. Here's why the workers are so vulnerable to heat stroke. UPS's ubiquitous brown trucks and warehouses are largely without air conditioning. After record earnings last year, the company installed cameras in its delivery trucks, but did not change its heat safety protocols. According to the union representing these workers, by the way, compounding long-held grievances about the company's priorities. And so these workers are represented by a union, which means they might have a fighting chance in changing their working conditions so they're not, collapsing from the terrible conditions that they have to work in without any adequate protection. Some UPS workers, by the way, have compared the heat in the back of their trucks to a sauna. Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration inspectors have documented heat indexes of 126 in the trucks. And temperature readings taken by workers in their trucks in Arizona and Florida show temperatures above 150 degrees. I was just in Florida, okay? It took me several days just to get used to that heat and humidity. I couldn't eat, I was constantly nauseous. I can't imagine having to deliver packages, having to do physical labor in those conditions with no air conditioning. But that is what these workers have to deal with because let's just keep it real. The employer here, UPS, would have to spend a little bit of money to provide the air conditioning or the fans that they need to by the way, to do their jobs and to do it in a way that doesn't put their health in jeopardy. And that would cut into their precious profits. But surveillance cameras, that's important because they want to make sure they can surveil their workers and get super punitive if they're not doing everything right. Because that's where their priorities are, Jessica. I mean, I'm not surprised by any of this.
Yeah, I love that you bring up the training. When I saw that, I immediately thought, what is the training? Are they putting people in a sauna to prepare to maintain homeostasis in extreme weather conditions? What is the training that prepares you for that? There isn't any. And I cannot stress this enough, that this is not what we meant when we said hot labor summer. No, nothing like this. People have to work to pay their bills to survive. Now they're working jobs that kind of risk their life. And the interesting thing about this story is they're nearing contract negotiations, right? A lot of the UPS workers, they're in the Teamsters union. What's concerning is Sean O'Brien, the president of the Teamsters, said that they'll be prepared to strike at this time next summer. We can't really wait until next summer. The problem with this is there are all of these provisions in their union contract right now that suggests all of these criteria need to be met and certain officials need to declare that there is a strike. And I think this is the kind of condition where there could be a wildcat strike among UPS workers. I assume that there's already tensions about what they want to bring up in this next contract negotiation if people are collapsing. because of heat stroke. There are a ton of other workers who are uncomfortable all day long at work, who are probably very ready to strike. And this is why we don't just need unions, we need strong unions that actually represent workers' interests. We've had a lot of situations where workers have been on strike regarding contracts, and their union leaders have signed contracts that many of the workers are not happy with. And so we really need to have a hot labor summer in a different sense of the word hot.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Sometimes stories like this make it feel like it's a hopeless situation, right? Like, what can we as ordinary people do to help out? We talk about organizing your own workplace a lot, but I would assume that most of us receive packages, whether it's through Amazon or UPS or one of these other delivery services. I really do hope that these workers don't wait until next summer, and if wildcat strikes happen, I think that could yield some positive benefits, especially at a time when we hear, there's all this lip service paid to workers who help our supply chain move and function smoothly. And do you really want to mess with delivery drivers right now, right? Like, just give them the basics to do their jobs in a safe environment. But one thing that I personally like to do is, leave, if you're not going to be home when a package is going to be delivered, leave some cold water bottles out for the delivery drivers. If you come across them, ask them if there's anything you could do to help them out. Help out your fellow Americans, okay? Because I think a lot of people take this for granted, the fact that they're in their comfortable homes or comfortable offices, but there are people out there having to deal with the terrible environmental conditions out there thanks to exacerbated heat, droughts, whatever, from climate change. And I hate seeing that people are like literally fainting from heat stroke because of this heat wave, and these workers just get forgotten because our lawmakers aren't looking out for them. The union, in this case, I wish fought a lot harder. And when they get into their negotiations soon, I hope that they demand way better working conditions, including, come on, man, in the very least, air conditioning in their warehouses. But employers aren't gonna do these things out of the kindness of their own hearts. Their fiduciary responsibility is to maximize profits, to return interest or to return money or profit to the shareholders, the individuals who have invested in the company. That is the #1 priority for them. And they see labor as a massive cost that needs to be reined in. So unless the workers fight for it, unless lawmakers provide the right regulations, pass the right regulations to keep these workers safe, again, under this model, this capitalistic model, the employer is not gonna do what's necessary to keep the workers safe.
Absolutely, yeah. It reminds me of this like really old quote from like the Ford era. And I don't think this conversation actually happened. It's kind of myth, but it's about automation, but it can also be applied to paying workers such low wages and putting them in such terrible conditions that they will not want to work for you. And moreover, they will hardly be able to meet their basic needs and pay for rent, right? People are paid way less than living wages all around the country right now. And the story goes that like Henry Ford had a visitor in his factory and he's like, look at all of these like robots that are helping us assemble cars now. And he said, well, who's gonna buy the cars is the effect of it. And that's exactly what we're dealing with, I think, in the United States all over. If you're not paying your workers well and you're not treating your workers well, UPS workers have to take a counted amount of steps to get from the truck to get to the doorstep. Their everyday behavior is tracked so much. They're basically owned by UPS. It is really scary when you get into it. But we're in this weird situation where something's gotta give because there's not a huge incentive for people to keep working for their employer anymore. If they can't meet their basic needs, if their life is at risk when they're at work. I mean, if you're a shareholder, if you are someone who invests in these corporations, it's not really in your interest either to be treating workers like this. The entirety of profit wouldn't be possible if these people were not working every day for UPS. So yeah, it's in their interest as well. And I hope they figure it out before it's too late and everyone's striking and things get violent.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.